hello everyone, and welcome again today. On today's episode, we're continuing to look at ON1 Photo Raw 2018. In today's episode, we'll be looking at their black and white filter. I'm excited about this tutorial today because I really enjoy their black and white filter. It has some really cool features to it, so let's go ahead and dive into it. Again, what I'm doing is using ON1 Photo Raw 2018 as a plugin inside of Photoshop. So the first thing we want to do is duplicate our background layer. So we're going to go up to our background layer and type Command J on a Mac to duplicate the background layer, or Control J in a PC. Secondly, we're going to come up to the menu bar at the top of Photoshop, click on Filter, find the ON1 folder, and then click on ON1 Effects 2018. Give that a click, and we will launch ON1 Photo Raw. The first thing we want to do is click on Add Filter, and this opens up our 24 unique filters inside of ON1 Photo Raw 2018. The filter we're looking at today is the black and white filter, so let's give that a click. And as we do, we notice we have a beautiful black and white image on our screen. Now that's just the starting point. From here we can go and have all kinds of wonderful fun. But first, let's look at the opacity slider. So the opacity slider, just if you move it to the left, it'll slowly remove your filter effect off your image till you get to 0 and you're back to the original image, and then you can slowly move it to the right and we will go to the full black and white image. Okay, so for now, let's leave it at full 100%. The next thing we want to do is look at the styles here, or presets. What these do is they simulate film looks. In the old days, we used to use black and white films, and on our lenses, we used to install a different type of filter on our lenses. We would put a green filter on there, possibly a yellow filter, a red filter. A yellow filter would make blue skies get a little darker. The foliage and trees would get a little lighter. So we get some more contrast pop in our image. And that's what these styles do. They simulate adding a filter to your lens. Okay, so let's click on green, and that's the look we get. Let's click on yellow. We would get that look. Click on red. We get that look. Click on infrared. That would simulate like an infrared film in a camera. And then we have the more drop down. We can give that a click and we'll see more styles in here. And we have a bunch of styles in here. And they're named different names. The first one is called Adele. And that's a grainy look. Lots of high contrast, a little underexposed look. Pretty cool looking. And let's hover over another. In blue, that would simulate a blue filter, chrome, coffee. A little bit of toning to that one, cyanotype, a little bit of a blue tone, deep blacks. Now, when I hovered over deep blacks, it took it a second or two for it to kick in. And the reason being is because some of these presets, there's a lot going on behind the scenes in these presets, and a lot of different adjustments are being made. So sometimes that there's a little bit of lag when you hover over these. Sometimes they go immediately. So what I like to do in that case is, let me just click off of here. Go to the left-hand side of the screen, the bottom corner. See this little icon here? Give it a click. It brings up our preset panel, or our preset panel or pane. And we see all these different thumbnails that we can look through here. And I don't like looking at my presets here because they're small little thumbnails. So what I like to do is go up to these little 4 squares here, give that a click, and that opens up our a viewer here where we can view all the different presets, which is really cool. Now, if you look in the left-hand bottom corner here, there's a thumbnail slider here. So you can adjust these thumbnails, make them smaller or larger. I usually take them the whole way to the right because I want to see my preset thumbnails really big so I can really look through here and get an idea of what I want to use. So this is pretty cool, right? So you can just look through here. And this, I like when ON1 does this for us because it really lets us take a look at different presets, and it helps us to get in our minds maybe a different direction we might want to go with our image. So let's just take a look through here. I like this fade to black and white here. There's a lot of nice contrast going on here. I like what's happening in these clouds. The gold toner is pretty nice. The grainy film looks cool. I like that one. I like this high key. We can just scroll through all these and, it's like a kid in a candy store, right? And see the one we like, and let's pick it. I'm going to go with this subtle selenium right here. So let me give that a click. and that comes onto our screen. Pretty cool. I like the way the clouds look here, all misty. Pretty cool looking image right now. Now, these thumbnails over here kind of bother me, so to get rid of them, what I'm going to do is just click on that icon again in the lower left-hand corner, and those go away. Now, okay, so we looked at all the different styles that we had, and so now let's dig deeper into this filter. We've looked at the presets. Now let's look at making our adjustments without presets. So we have two different types of conversions that we can make, two different types of black and white conversions. One is called color response. There's a drop-down menu here, and if I click it, we see the other one, which is called channel mixer. So let me just click off of there, and we're back to color response. So I'm going to show you color response first, and then I'll show you channel mixer. Color response is my favorite, and what you do with it is you have these sliders. You have a red slider, a yellow, green, aqua, blue, and magenta, and those represent the different color tones in your image. If I take the red slider and move it to the right, I'll make any tones that were red in the image appear to be lighter. If I move it to the left, they'll get darker. So let me show you how that works. So if I click and drag the red slider to the right, any red tones will get lighter. If I move it to the left, they get darker. And then you just adjust it to the spot where it looks pleasing to your eye. So I'm going to say somewhere maybe right around there. I want those hills back there to look in mountains to look a little darker. And then the yellow, any yellows in your image, if I move it to the right, they will get brighter. If I move it to the left, they'll get darker. So depending what look you want, you just stop at that point. I'm going to brighten my yellows up a little bit, so I make some of that fogginess and distant hills look a little lighter. And any greens in the image, I can move the greens up or down. Not much green in this image, is showing up right down here. And I'm going to keep it lower here. And I know there's not much aqua here, but I'll move the aqua to the right and to the left. And you can see not much is happening. To get your slider back to the center detemp position, just click on the name of the slider, like aqua, double click it, and it'll go back to the center detent. Now the blue, there's some blue in here, so I'm going to move the blue to the left. And as I do, notice like how we see some nice contrast popping out in these foggy areas here. And then the magenta, if I move the magenta to the right, not a whole lot is happening, a little bit in the foggy areas, but I'm going to move it to the left and make those darker areas in the fog get a little darker, popping a little bit more contrast there. Okay, so that's how those sliders work if you're just going to adjust them, by hand. And then the other way you can do it is, well, first let's go up here to the reset icon, reset this filter. We can click this auto button here, and if we click it, what it does is ON1 will make the adjustments for you automatically. And then you can come here and tweak these sliders. And sometimes I'll do that, just tweak them, move them a little bit one way or the other till you get a spot that you like. So you can play with that too. Not a bad way to work either. So you can play with that and make some adjustments there. Let's hit reset again. And the third way that you can do this color response is go to this little eyedropper tool here, give it a click, hover over the canvas, and it turns into a crosshatch. And then if you click and hold your mouse down, that crosshatch turns to a line with an arrow to the left and right. And then you can just hover over any area of the image that you want to make an adjustment, and then just move your mouse to the right to make that portion lighter, or move it to the left to make it darker. And whenever you click that eyedropper tool and hover over an area, it's going to pick or select that particular color that is there. Okay, so if I click right here, click and drag to the right, you notice it's picking the blue tones. So that's kind of nice, and I like to use that sometimes. That's pretty effective. So let's go back up and click the reset button. So we've covered the color response in a lot of detail here. But that's how it works. It's not that hard to use, guys, but you can get some pretty dramatic black and white conversions with it. Let's now take a look at the channel mixer. Let's go up to our drop-down dialog here, give it a click, and click on channel mixer. And you'll notice right here we have this slider here which says filter, representing different color filters that we can put on top of our lenses and give us different looks. And all we need to do with this particular slider is give it a drag to the left and to the right and stop at the spot that we like. And the image will change as we move it. Sometimes it doesn't change too much, but as we move it more and more, you might see a different look pop up here. And just be watching it, drag it rather slowly, and just be watching for that certain spot that might just jump at you and say, oh yeah, that's it, that's beautiful. When you hit that spot, like maybe right there, stop. And there it is. That's your black and white conversion right there. That's the channel mixer. It's a very simplistic way of making a black and white conversion. I don't really use it that often, but I do recommend trying it because you might find a spot that really looks good. And if you find a spot that looks good, it's done. It makes your job so much more easier. So give it a try. But usually, more often than not, you're going to drop back to the other effect, which is the color response. And that's the one you're going to want to use generally. But try the channel mixer. Sometimes it will work for you. Now we're going to look at the tone section. Let's click on tone here with the drop down. We'll see a bunch of different adjustments. We have brightness, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites and blacks, and detail. First off, I like to start from the top down. For instance, we would set our sliders here and our color response. So let me just do that real quick here. Get an adjustment I kind of like here. So maybe somewhere here. Pull my greens back a little bit. I know there was no aquas. I'm going to pull my blues back, pull my magentas back. Okay, so now let's work with our tone. So we've set all the sliders here for our color response to get our black and white conversion set properly. Now we want to adjust the tones of the image, like the brightness, contrast, and highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. So let's look at our brightness first. If I move my brightness slider to the right, we'll make our image lighter. Move it to the left, we'll make our image darker, depending what look we're looking for. So I'm going to go a little bit underexposed here in this image. Contrast, I'm going to bump my contrast up a little bit, give me a little more high contrast image here. My highlights, let's move my highlights up to the right, add more highlights, or let's take highlights away and see. I like to move these sliders one way or the other, and then the other, I should say, one way and then the other, just to see what look I'm liking the best. In my case, I'm liking it to the left a little bit, right around here. My shadows too, I can open up my shadows or I can close them down a little bit. In my case, I want a little more contrast, so I'm going to close those shadows down a little bit. Now we can set a white and a black point, and make sure that your levels is showing up here. If it's not, if it's on navigation, you'll see the picture up here, little thumbnail of the picture. Click it on levels if you're not seeing levels. And then to set your white and black point, what you want to do is hold your J key down and then move the white slider to the right. Move it till you start seeing some red clipping in your image. That shows you where the whites are totally clipping and there's no detail in whites. So you just want to back that off until every trace of red just disappears. And once it does, once it goes away, you know you have your white point set. So I actually write it 0. Now there's a little bit now, right, like about a -2 right there. And I have no white clipping. Very important that you don't clip your whites, because if you clip your whites, when you go to print your print, you're not going to apply, especially with an inkjet printer, you won't be applying any ink to the image. And that's going to look horrible, because if you hold your print up to the light, you'll see where there's no ink hitting that paper, and it's going to look a little bit funny. So make sure that you don't clip your whites. So do this little trick to set your white and black point. Now let's set our black point. Let's hold our J key down and move our blacks to the left. When we see that blue starting to show, we're definitely clipping our blacks. Now, it doesn't hurt to clip the blacks if you like the look. In other words, if you like a darker look in your image in the black shadow areas, it's okay to clip the blacks because ink will be applied to the paper and that's not going to look funky on the print. So I'm going to release the J key so I don't see the blue anymore. And now I'm just going to eyeball these blacks myself with my eye without seeing that blue on there. But I'm going to go right about here. That's where I like the black point. And then the last slider you have to deal with is the detail slider. Now, if you move the detail slider to the right, you'll add more detail or clarity into your image. If you move it to the left, you'll make your image look a little softer and dreamier. In my case, I like that little dreamier look. You see what it's doing to the foggy areas? It's giving me a nice ethereal feel. So I think I'm going to bring my details to the left just a little bit. Maybe around a -15, somewhere in there. And that is the tone section. Next, we're going to look at the toner section. That gets a little more complicated. Now we're going to take a look at the toner section, which is right here. Let's click this drop-down dialog here. And inside here, we're going to see all the toner adjustments. Okay, we have some presets right here where it says type. I'll go over those in a second, but we also have hue, amount, balance, And that's for the highlights. And then we have for the shadows, we have hue and amount. And then we have this little button here that we can click called preserve whites and blacks. And I'll show you how this all works. First, let's look at the presets. So let's click this drop down here. And this is nice. So we can come up here to none. There's no preset. And just kind of hover over and see the different presets. And I really like this because we can really look and see if there's a look here that we really like. That coffee is kind of nice. And I think I also liked the black tea. Let's go to the black tea. Give that a click. All right. And then we can come here and make some tweaks. So we can adjust the hue a little bit. Move it one way, move it the other way. Move it more to the red tones, more to the yellow tones. We can adjust the amount more or less. Okay. And let's go to the hue. Let's take the amount up on the hue. So the hue is taking on these reddish tones here. All right, some more or less. Get that look I kind of like, which is kind of right here. I might want to adjust this hue a little bit one way or the other. See, I'm taking it more to greener tones. Let's take it more back to the redder side of things. Let's take the amount up a little bit more here. And now let's adjust this balance here. Let's move it to the right. And we're favoring the highlights here. If I move it to the left, I'm favoring the shadow colors more. So we can adjust that balance and get the look just where we like it. And let's say right about there. I'm just going to pull this amount of shadows back just a little bit here, maybe to right around there. Okay, so that is how we adjust the toner. And they're not calling this split tone, they're calling it toner. And this is very interesting, guys. This is like a split tone filter, and it works like a split tone filter, but it's a little different. It's very interesting. Let me read you what ON1 says about their split toning filters. This filter applies a duotone style effect by using a gradient map. That's very interesting. It uses a gradient map that tints the dark and light portions of the image in different hues. All right, now let's dig a little bit deeper into this toner adjustment here. So let's take a look at these swatches here, one for the highlights and one for the shadows. If we click that swatch, we're going to get a color wheel up. And if I'm on a Mac, and this is what I see here, and I have different options here. I can choose to see my colors here. And also, I like the color wheel, by the way. And also, if you have a PC, you'll have a color wheel or some type of way to change your colors or alter your colors too. So just bear that in mind. It's going to look a little different than what a Mac does. So here we go. So what I want to show you is, again, this particular toner section, which is basically a split toner, but it's a little more advanced than a split toner. It also works with gradient mapping, so it maps your colors. So it'll take your highlights and map those to new colors. It'll take your shadows and map those to new colors. So that's pretty cool and exciting. So to get started here, what I want to do is take a look at the bottom of the color wheel, and you see this slider here. To the left here, this is a representation of the lighter tones, and as we move to the right, you're seeing a representation of the darker tones. Okay. Now bear in mind, I'm working with highlights here, so I'm mainly interested in this slider anywhere between the midpoint to the left in the lighter tones. And when I look at the shadow slider, I'm going to be looking at the midpoint to the right hand side. Okay. I could go through the entire spectrum here if I want to, but that would be doing more like more really artistic effects, okay? Which we could go that way, but I'm really interested in the toning capabilities right now, so bear that in mind. But you could get crazy with these adjustments. Anyway, I'm going to take the amount slider just to show you what we're doing here and move it the whole way up to the right. It's going to help us better. So when I move this amount slider the whole way to the right, this particular, where the slider is set right here, which is representing this tone, this color tone right here, that is where my highlights are being remapped to, that color. Now, if I take the slider, and I will demonstrate this by moving this the whole way to the right, watch how those colors get mapped. They're getting darker and darker and darker. then they will actually go into pure black as I move it to the right. Pretty cool, right? But again, I'm only interested basically for the toning section, probably somewhere between the mid-range of this slider to the left. So I'm going to move it more to the left here. But now watch what I do here. I'm going to take this cursor point and move it more up into yellows, saturated yellows, and look how my image takes on a more saturated yellow. You couldn't get these effects in a typical split toning filter. So I can adjust these colors any way I want. I can go into my green tones, I can go into my red tones, I can go into my magentas, purples, blues, and all these different variations of saturation I can go through here to just minor amounts of saturation. Let's go back into the warmer tones here. Move it a little bit more to the sepia side of things. And then I could take this this slider here and move it more to the right, watching those tones will get darker. Okay, and I can move it to the left and they'll get lighter. So that's pretty cool, right? I can also come over to where it says amount here, and I can pull this amount slider back and have adjustment there as well. Okay, but right now, basically what I'm doing is using this color wheel to give me my adjustments. And that's a pretty effective way of getting your tonal adjustments. So bear that in mind. All right, now let's click X to get, or no, let's leave this color wheel up. All I need to do is come over to the shadow swatch, give it a click, and now we're representing our darker colors. So again, like I said, guys, I'm looking more from the mid-tones up to the right to the darker tones. But first, let's do the same thing I did with the highlights and move this amount of the shadows the whole way to the right. Okay. So now this tone right here, which is represented right here, is getting mapped to my shadow tones of the image. Now, if I move it to the right, just like it did with the highlights, it's getting darker and darker. And you notice the color is draining off it as I move it more to the right. Now, as I move it to the left, it's going to get brighter and brighter and brighter. And this will be a bit unrealistic for the shadow slider because I'm moving way into the lights. And that's what I was talking about earlier, saying you can get some weird effects and more artistic looks. But I'm really interested in toning effects. So for toning effects, I want to keep this more anywhere between the mid to the right-hand side of this slider here. So maybe somewhere right around in here. And now watch, I can take this cursor and move this all around so I can move it into the yellower tones, get it more like into sepia type tones. Somewhere maybe like in here. I could favor more to the green side of things, go to a higher saturated green, go into aquas, and get all kind of really cool looks just by dragging this little cursor around here on this color wheel. So it's really cool, right? I can get all kind of really cool looks. And I can do pretty much the entire adjustment right on this color wheel. I don't really have to really go over here and affect these sliders too much. So in my case, I just took the amount slider and drug it the whole way to the right and of the highlights and the whole way to the right of the shadows. And now then I clicked on my swatch, and now I'm just getting the color I want with the color wheel here, with moving the cursor around and also adjusting the lightness of that particular color right here, just to achieve the effect that I want. So that's pretty cool. And once I get a look that I like, a color and a look that I like, which I'm liking that maybe right there, but I want my shadows to go a little bit darker, somewhere right in there, and I'm thinking that looks pretty good. Now I'm just going to click the X on this color wheel here. And if I like this setting, what I can do is I can come up here to where it says more in that little drop down dialog, give it a click, and come the whole way to the bottom where it says save new style. Give that a click and give it a name. Let's call it, I'm not going to call it, I'm going to call it Mountain View. Calling it Mountain View, and I'm going to save it. When I click save, I'm saving every adjustment that I made here is getting saved right up into that style. Now let's reset this entire filter here and then go to the more drop down, give it a click, and click on Mountain View, or hover over it. You can see there's one I made earlier called Misty Mountain. Here's Mountain View, and then there's all my other presets. But let's go to Mountain View, give that a click, and there is that setting I just made. Pretty cool, right? That's really, really neat. One last thing I want to point out, and that is, see here where it says Preserve Whites and Blacks? If you click this, what that does is it will remove the effect off all the black tones and all the lighter white tones. So it'll totally not put your color effect or toning onto the extreme whites and the extreme blacks. It'll remove the tone from there. But for now, I'm going to uncheck that or click that button off. So I'm back to my adjustment. Okay, guys, so there you have that. And now I just have one last thing to explain to you, and that's film grain. All right, the film grain. So let's click on film grain and open up the film grain dialog, and we'll see that we have a preset here. Right now it says film none. These are different presets for simulations of different films. We have an amount slider and a size slider. This is the default setting of the slider, 70 on the amount and 100 on the size. So let's go ahead and click on the presets here in the drop-down menu. And as we hover over these presets, we will see the different grain patterns come over our image. And these are real grain simulations, which are pretty cool. Let's go to Ilford Delta 3200 because we can see that one really well. And I'm pretty sure that's going to show up in this video pretty well for you. So let's give that a click. And like I said, it's defaulted at 70 and 100. So if we thought that that was too much on the amount, we could just pull that back to the left a little bit, take some of the edge of that grain off. And if the size was too large or small, we could adjust it. So we can make the grain larger or smaller. Okay, depending on what we like. So we have full range there. And that's it. And let's go to a different, because I don't want to add that much grain to my image. Let's put a more realistic grain on. Let's do maybe like a Ilford Delta 400. Let's just add a little bit of grain to our image here. And I like where the amount is. That's pretty good. And when we're all said and done, guys, all we have to do is click on Done. And that brings us back into Photoshop. And if we come up to our layer here and we click on the eyeball, we'll see the before and the after. So pretty cool, right? Before and after. Well, there it is, ON1's black and white filter inside of ON1 Photo Raw 2018. I'm sorry this video went a little bit long today, but I wanted you guys to fully understand how this filter works. It's pretty powerful and there's a lot to it. If you liked my video today, please give it a like and share it with your friends. Also, if you've not yet subscribed to my channel, please do so and click that notification bell so you can be reminded of all the new training videos that I'm putting out on a very regular basis. Approximately every 1 to 3 days I put out a new video. Well guys, thanks for joining me today and I will see you later.